The Tottenham Hotspurs and Bolton Wanderers were 43 minutes into their match on March 17, 2012, when tragedy struck. Bolton's Fabrice Muamba suddenly collapsed, sending the crowd and his fellow players into a panic. Officially, Muamba's heart was stopped for 78 minutes. It would have been longer if one spectator in the crowd hadn't been around to save him. Andrew Diener is a doctor who was a supporter on that match, but he wasn't imagining what will happen that day at White Hart Lane. It was a high-energy game full of chances for both sides, but as the first half came to a close, an unsteady and faint Muamba began to feel strange. He stopped and knew something was seriously wrong. Around 40 minutes in, my vision started to get very blurry. When I looked at someone, I could see two of them, he explains. Then out of nowhere, bang, I was on the floor. That was the last time I was able to play football again, says Muamba. Fabrice was face down, gasping for air. But he was barely moving. Cameras panned away from his body and focused on players from both teams, who looked on in shock. Rafael van der Vaart later described the moment as the absolute low in my football career. The first minutes after Muamba collapsed were crucial. Every minute lost before applying CPR is estimated to decrease the chances of survival by 10%. Cardiac arrest, which is what Muamba suffered, is significantly different from a heart attack. The second is usually caused by coronary heart disease, through which a clot starves the heart of blood and oxygen and damages the heart muscle itself. Cardiac arrest, which can be caused by electrocution and the like, but is usually the result of genetic unhappiness, can affect the healthiest hearts and simply means that they suddenly stop pumping blood properly, the heart's internal electrical system having become temporarily scrambled. CPR is urgent, and furthermore complex treatment is mandatory. It didn't take long, in Muamba's case, for the CPR to be administered. Bolton's physiotherapist Andy Mitchell, meanwhile, was the first person to see him fall to the ground and immediately ran over to assess the situation before the Spurs doctor, Shawaz Mual, and his colleague Jonathan Tobin quickly followed. Mual flipped a lifeless Muamba onto his back and began chest compressions. After hitting the ground, it took a total of 67 seconds for the midfielder to receive CPR. Seconds later, doctors had already placed a defibrillator on his chest to try and get the heart started again. At this point, the majority of those inside White Hart Lane started chanting Muamba's name as Tobin continued to try and resuscitate the player by using mouth-to-mouth. He remembers every moment. We could hear the crowd chanting Fab's name in the background while this was all going on, too. It was one of the most surreal experiences, he says. The chants of Fabrice Muamba, stopped when the realization and seriousness of the incident began to dawn on the thousands in attendance that day. As the stadium fell silent, with several members of the crowd in tears, referee Howard Webb decided to call it a day. The match was abandoned. For the medical team, however, this journey was far from over. After trying to resuscitate him on the pitch without success, Muamba was transferred to an ambulance. It was here where his Bolton teammates were hit with the shocking reality of what just happened. At this point, we come to the name of our hero, Andrew Diener, the cardiologist who ran from his seat in the crowd that day to help doctors fight to save Fabrice's life, was in the ambulance too. He was only at the match because he had been given a spare ticket by his nephew who was unable to attend. He wasn't supposed to be at the game, Muamba tells us. Muamba was taken to the London Chest Hospital on the evening of March 17th with a slim chance of survival. Tobin says he couldn't see any recovery being possible at that point, and you can understand why. Muamba received a total of 15 shocks before his arrival, but to no avail. Doctors spent a further 40 minutes restarting his heart and 15 further shocks later, in a moment Fabrice himself describes as a miracle. The midfielder was brought back to life after effectively being dead for 78 minutes. His heart started beating again. He was put in a medically induced coma and against all odds, he was on the long road to recovery. During his stay in the hospital, many friends and family visited Muamba, including Weeder, who recalls an incredible story involving Lionel Messi, of all people. Muamba left the London Chest Hospital 4 weeks later and returned to his home in Manchester. There were many obstacles to overcome in the coming days, weeks, and months, and they weren't just physical issues either. Fabrice admits he also struggled with his mental health in the early stages of his recovery. which meant he took his emotions out on those closest to him. In terms of a career in the game he loved, Muamba knew he would never play football again. But again, it was the mental aspect he struggled with most. After the incident at White Hart Lane, he forced himself to go and watch football but admits he hated going. You can see why it would be such a painful experience for someone who was forced to retire at age 24 from a circumstance out of his control, but as time has gone on, Muamba has learned how to deal with it. He graduated from university with a BA in sports journalism and, after getting all his coaching badges, Muamba became a member of Rockdale's coaching staff in 2018, where he coached the under-16 seconds based at the club's Manchester Development Centre. Muamba continues to give advice to players in a role with the PFA, but whatever happens in his life from now, the former England under-21 international knows how lucky he is to be alive considering what happened on that harrowing day in 2012. In the end, Muamba says to a newspaper, "Even today, when I go for a checkup, I go down to London and see the people who treat me that day. I will be thankful to the end of my life to God and Dr. Diener, who was that day on the match. God was sent him on that match." Fabrice says. Because of health problems, Muamba and today need to visit North London Hospital, but without danger for life. For more videos and stories like this, leave a like and subscribe for support. Until the next watching, Lake Production.